The message in the Lane family group chat was short and sharp. Emergency meeting. Thursday, 7 p.m. Monica's situation. My situation. That's what they called it. Quitting a prestigious consulting track, trading in polished boardrooms for a tiny apartment and a battered sedan. 2 years later, they still spoke of it like an illness I refused to cure. When I pulled up in front of my parents' colonial house, the same one where ambition was weighed in Ivy League diplomas and six-figure bonuses, I saw the proof of hierarchy lined up in chrome and steel. Father's black Mercedes, mother's pearl white BMW, my sister Adele's gleaming Tesla. And next to it, my brother-in-law Nicholas's matte gray SUV, paid for back when his crypto bets looked golden before they collapsed into ash. My own Toyota Corolla looked almost apologetic on the cobblestone drive. Exactly the way they saw me. Inside, the living room had been staged like a corporate tribunal. Father by the fireplace, posture CEO straight. Mother at his side, lips pursed. Adele on the leather sofa, her designer heels crossed just so. Nicholas leaned back, smirking, the faint desperation of a man who had once tweeted, "Bitcoin to the moon," now hiding behind an expensive watch he hadn't been able to flip fast enough. "Monica," Mother said, tone soft but slicing, "it's time to face reality." I checked my phone. A single notification waited. From Marcus, my CFO. Fortune 500 feature goes live at 8 p.m. I typed back, "Perfect timing. Intervention starts at 7. His reply came instantly. Savage. They thought this night would end with me begging for forgiveness. They had no idea that by the time the clock struck 8, the world would be calling me something else entirely. Don't miss what happens when masks fall. Subscribe now. People look at me now and think I was born with steel in my spine. They see the headlines, the valuation, the polished interviews. What they don't see is the rubble I had to crawl through to get here. I once wore the uniform of corporate success, tailored suits, glossy conference rooms, polite nods from men who pretended to listen while already planning how to edge me out. I was the rising star at one of the most prestigious consulting firms in the country. People whispered, "Partner track," when I walked by. My family clinked their glasses whenever my name was mentioned at dinners. Monica Lane, the golden daughter. The proof that the Lane legacy lived on. But behind the polished surface, I was bleeding out. Day after day. I presented data models only to watch them be dismissed, or worse, stolen by senior colleagues who slapped their names on the final slide. I worked until my hands trembled on the keyboard, until my vision blurred from staring at endless spreadsheets. And every time I dared to suggest a new approach, the response was always the same. "Smart idea, Monica. Let's have one of the guys take it from here." At home, my parents praised my stability, but reminded me that a real future included the right husband. My sister Adele paraded her lavish lifestyle, while Nicholas bragged about how he had cracked the code with crypto investments. They laughed at my spreadsheets, calling them cute little puzzles. The breaking point came one night after midnight, staring at the skyline from my penthouse apartment. I had everything I was supposed to want: salary, prestige, the boyfriend who fit neatly into cocktail party conversations. But inside, I felt hollow. It wasn't ambition anymore. It was a cage. I closed my laptop and whispered to myself, what if I built something of my own? The next morning, I handed in my resignation. My boss smirked as if I were throwing my life away. "Good luck," he said. "You'll be back." My parents reacted the same way, with disappointment wrapped in false concern. "You're making a terrible mistake," Mother said. "No one walks away from a lane opportunity." I sold the penthouse. I bought the smallest unit in a rundown building no one would ever associate with a lane. And I traded in my luxury car for a Toyota Corolla that ran reliably and drew no attention. My family took it as confirmation that I'd lost my mind. Astramind Dynamics was born out of desperation and stubbornness. 4 folding chairs, a borrowed whiteboard, and 3 engineers willing to work for equity because I couldn't afford salaries. We coded in the dark, fueled by instant noodles and hope. When servers crashed, we patched them with secondhand parts. When money dried up, I sold the last designer bag in my closet to make payroll. The world wasn't kind. Investors laughed me out of boardrooms. Adaptive AI? Too ambitious. Stealth mode? That's just code for unproven. Where's your co-founder? You really think you can do this alone? They didn't want to see the grit in my eyes. They only saw a woman without a safety net. The first product demo was a disaster. Our algorithm glitched, spitting out nonsense predictions in front of a room full of skeptical angels. They walked out without a handshake. That night, I cried in the bathroom of our tiny office until my throat ached. My team looked at me with silent questions. Are we done? But failure, I discovered, can be fuel. We tore the code apart line by line. We worked until dawn, until the bugs were buried, until the algorithm began to breathe like a living thing. Then came the first success. A small pilot project predicting flood risks in a rural county. Our model flagged a potential surge 36 hours before government warnings went out. No one in the press noticed. But a local hospital director sent me an email that I still keep framed on my desk. Because of your system, we moved critical patients in time. You saved lives. I stared at those words until tears blurred them. For the first time, I felt certain. I wasn't chasing money or titles anymore. I was chasing impact. Meanwhile, my family kept circling like vultures. Adele bragged about her luxury spa weekends, while Nicholas posted pictures of crypto gains that looked impressive on Instagram. At dinners, they introduced me as the one still figuring herself out. My father would shake his head and ask if I was ready to come back to real business. They didn't see the nights I walked home in the rain, shoes ruined, laptops soaked, praying our servers wouldn't crash. They didn't hear the whispered promises I made to myself at 3 a.m., that I would prove them wrong not with words, but with results. Every insult became data. Every rejection became a variable in my model. Every dismissal became another reason to keep building. When funding finally came, it wasn't because of charm or connections. It was because our numbers were undeniable. Accuracy rates climbing, error margins shrinking, systems adapting in ways no one thought possible. A $10 million seed round closed almost overnight. My team cheered, but I stayed quiet. I knew it was only the beginning. I hid my progress from my family. Let them think I was barely scraping by. Let Nicholas smirk over his crypto portfolio while I coded through the night. Let Adele whisper about poor Monica while I signed NDAs with Fortune 500 partners who wanted to license our tech. They saw struggle. What I was building was survival. What they didn't know was that every late night, every tear, every moment I considered giving up had been compounding. Just like interest, just like data. Quietly, invisibly, relentlessly. And all the while, I waited, not for their approval, not for validation, but for the day when numbers would speak louder than their pity. That day was coming faster than they realized. By the time the Lane family circled me in that living room tribunal, Astramind was no longer a fragile experiment held together with duct tape and desperation. It had become an empire, quiet, unseen, deliberate. We had grown from 4 engineers in a borrowed office to 200 employees working across 3 time zones. Our headquarters was a glass tower in the city's financial district, though my family still believed I lived in a shoebox apartment. What they didn't know was that the tiny unit I called home was actually the smallest apartment in a building I owned outright. The Toyota Corolla they mocked was still parked outside, not because I couldn't afford more, but because I preferred a car that didn't scream wealth. Every dollar I saved went back into the company. Every choice was intentional, every sacrifice strategic. Astramind's technology was no longer just theory. We had secured contracts with energy providers, financial institutions, and disaster relief agencies. Our adaptive AI systems were quietly running simulations that governments and corporations depended on, though no one outside a select circle knew our name. That changed the night of the Fortune 500 announcement. At 7:58 p.m., while my family was still rehearsing their lines about my situation, the news went live. Astramind Dynamics, new entry, Fortune 500. Valuation climbs from 500 miners to over 1 Bs after landmark acquisition. My sister Adele's eyes widened as her phone lit up with notifications. Nicholas leaned forward, confusion etched across his face. "Wait, that can't be right." "It's right," I said calmly, folding my hands in my lap. "The valuation updated an hour ago. We've crossed the billion mark." My father's glass of scotch froze mid-air. My mother's lips parted, but no words came out. I continued, voice even. "We develop adaptive learning systems that can predict, adjust, and optimize in real time. From weather patterns to financial markets to global supply chains, our tech is already being deployed worldwide. That's why I've been working late nights." That's why I've been silent, not because I was failing, but because I was building. The silence was deafening. Only the faint hum of the fireplace filled the room. I opened my tablet and flipped to a chart, growth curves steep as mountain peaks. This is Astramind, not a dream, not a hobby, a billion-dollar company. And this, I said, glancing around the room, is the last time you'll call it my situation. Their faces told the story better than I ever could. Mother's carefully drawn composure cracked. Adele clutched her phone, desperate to process what she was reading. Nicholas paled, the bravado of his crypto investments dissolving. And father, ever the patriarch, sat back heavily, his authority crumbling under the weight of numbers he couldn't dismiss. I had waited years for this moment, not to gloat, not to beg for validation, but to remind them of the truth. Success built in silence is still success, and sometimes it is the loudest of all. The morning after the Fortune 500 news, my office buzzed like a hive. Phones rang nonstop. Journalists begged for interviews. Investors who once ignored my emails suddenly remembered my name. I walked through the glass lobby of Astramind, every step deliberate. Staff nodded, eyes bright with the pride of being part of something bigger than themselves. This was no longer just my fight. It was our creation. "Your 9 a.m. is here," Maya, my assistant, said as she intercepted me with her tablet. "Venture capital check-in?" I asked. She hesitated. "Not exactly." When I stepped into the conference room, I froze, not in shock, but in recognition. Logan Hayes sat at the table, polished suit, charming smile, as if the years hadn't passed. "Monica," he said, rising smoothly. "You look incredible. Successful suits you." I stayed standing. "What are you doing here?" "Your mother mentioned you'd built something extraordinary." I had to see it for myself. Thought maybe we could reconnect. His smile was the same one that once convinced me to believe in him, but now it looked more like a mask than charm. "Reconnect," I repeated. "That's rich." "Don't be cold." He spread his hands. "We had history. Remember late nights in the city? I always knew you were special." My chest tightened, not with nostalgia, but with the memory of his words the night I quit my consulting job. "Tech is a man's world, Monica. You're smart, but play it safe. Consulting will always need diversity hires." "You told me my dreams were cute. That I should stick to safe work where people would appreciate the optics," I said flatly. He winced. "I didn't mean it like that. Look, things have changed. I have contacts, banks, funds. I could help you scale." I almost laughed. "We're already scaling. Without you." "Don't be stubborn. Partnerships matter. And let's be honest, success is sweeter when shared." I pressed the intercom button on the table. "Maya, please escort Mr. Hayes out. Update security protocol so his name is flagged." Logan's confident posture faltered. "Wait. Monica, don't do this. I was wrong. Fine. I underestimated you." "But don't shut me out." I leaned against the table, arms crossed. "You had your chance years ago. You dismissed me. You mocked me. And now you want a seat at the table I built? No, this table is full." He opened his mouth to argue, but Maya appeared with 2 security officers, calm and professional. Logan looked at me one last time, the smile gone, eyes sharp with wounded pride. "You'll regret this," he muttered. "I regret nothing," I replied, "especially not cutting out dead weight." The doors shut behind him. The room felt lighter, as if his absence had cleared the air. 5 minutes later, my real 9 a.m. arrived. Sarah Chin, the venture capitalist who'd backed more unicorns than most people could name. She glanced at the retreating figure in the hall, then raised an eyebrow. "Cleaning house?" she asked dryly. "Just clearing out misconceptions," I said, sliding a presentation onto the screen. She smiled. "Good. Now let's talk about building the future." That meeting wasn't just productive, it was electric. Sarah's questions cut sharp, her insights sharper. She didn't want to own Astramind. She wanted to partner with it. For the first time in a long time, I felt like someone was speaking my language. But the Logan encounter lingered in my mind, not as a wound, but as proof. Proof that success attracts both allies and opportunists. Proof that those who once doubted you will always come crawling back when the numbers rise. And proof that shutting the door on the past is sometimes the most liberating choice of all. By noon, I was seated in the boardroom, Fortune 500 article projected on the wall behind me. The board looked different now, more attentive, more careful with their questions. Power had shifted. Respect had been earned, not demanded. I took my seat at the head of the table, calm and steady. "Before we begin," I said, "let's address the obvious. Yes, Astramind has been recognized as a Fortune 500 company. Yes, we've crossed the billion-dollar threshold. But no, this doesn't change how we operate. We don't chase headlines. We build systems that change the world." The directors nodded. Marcus, my CFO, pulled up charts of growth so steep they looked like skyscrapers. I let the numbers speak first. Then I dropped the next revelation. Our next project, I said, is Nexus Grid, an AI architecture designed not just to predict outcomes, but to adapt across entire domains: supply chains, energy grids, disaster relief. Once it launches, Astramind won't just be ahead of the market. We will be the market. As I spoke, I felt the sting of every insult, every dismissal, every patronizing smile I'd endured. They had forged me into steel. And now, no one, least of all Logan Hayes, could touch what I had built. This was only the beginning. The boardroom emptied slowly, directors murmuring about Nexus Grid as if they had just witnessed a glimpse of the future. I stayed behind, reviewing contracts, my pen gliding across pages with steady precision. Marcus leaned over. "Your sister's in the lobby," he said quietly. "She's been here an hour. Says she won't leave until she speaks to you." I closed the folder. "Where is she?" "Conference room B. I put her there. The one with the uncomfortable chairs." A small smile tugged at my lips. "Perfect." When I entered, Adele was perched stiffly at the edge of the metal chair, her Prada bag clutched against her chest like a shield. Her hair, usually immaculate, had wilted from waiting. Nicholas lounged beside her, legs sprawled, the swagger of a man who once boasted about flipping tokens for millions, but now avoided eye contact with creditors. "Finally!" Adele burst out. "Do you know how humiliating it was to be kept waiting like strangers?" "You are strangers here," I said calmly, closing the door behind me. "Security followed protocol. Everyone does." Nicholas snorted. "Protocol. Cute. You think your billion-dollar toy makes you untouchable?" "Not untouchable," I corrected, sliding into the chair across from them. "Just protected." Adele leaned forward, her voice trembling. "Mom's been crying nonstop since last night. Dad hasn't gone to the office. They feel betrayed. You built all this and said nothing." I folded my hands. "You want the truth? You never asked." "You were too busy reminding me I was a failure." "That's not fair!" Adele snapped. "We were worried. You were living in a shoebox, driving that old car. What were we supposed to think?" "That maybe I had a plan," I replied. "But you preferred pity to curiosity." Nicholas leaned in, smirking. "Plans don't mean anything if you don't share them. You could have avoided all this tension. You could have brought me in. I have experience." I tilted my head. "Experience? Do you mean your crypto portfolio that lost 70% in one quarter? Or the NFT fund you convinced your friends to buy into before it collapsed?" His face flushed red. "That was market manipulation, not my fault. Everyone lost money." I slid a thin folder across the table. "Funny, because according to the reports, you weren't just a victim. You pumped your own coin, cashed out at the peak, and left investors bleeding, including 2 of Dad's clients. Did you think I wouldn't know?" Adele's eyes widened. "Nicholas—" "Don't listen to her," he hissed. "She's twisting things." I tapped the folder. "The documents aren't mine. They're from the SEC. Would you like me to play the recordings too?" I opened my laptop. Nicholas's own voice filled the room. "Don't put your money in Monica's startup. Amateur hour. If you want real returns, crypto is the future." Adele covered her mouth, horrified. "That was 2 years ago," Nicholas stammered. "Everyone was skeptical." "No," I cut in. "Everyone was cautious. You were malicious. You tried to poison potential investors against me because you were terrified I'd succeed where you'd failed." Adele's composure cracked. "Is this true?" she whispered. Nicholas said nothing. His silence was louder than any denial. I leaned back, folding my arms. Here's the test, Adele. Do you believe the man who lost your savings chasing digital mirages? Or the woman who just put this company on the Fortune 500? She looked between us, torn, then whispered, I don't know what to believe. That's the second test, I said. Do you even want to believe in me, Adele? Or would you rather cling to the idea that I'll always be the little sister who failed? Her eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry. We didn't mean to. Stop, I interrupted. I don't want apologies. I want honesty. You resented me. You envied me. And you dismissed me. Don't hide behind worry. Nicholas tried to regain ground, his voice rising. You think you're invincible now, huh? Fortune 500 today, gone tomorrow. Tech crashes all the time. I snapped the laptop shut, cutting him off. You could what? Pitch another coin? Convince my sister to bankroll your next collapse? Not here. Not ever. Adele reached across the table, her manicured hand trembling. Then what do you want from us? From me? I looked down at her hand, the same one that had patted mine condescendingly at dinners. Nothing. That's the point. I built this without you, without your approval, without your money, and I'll keep building, alone, if necessary. Her hand dropped. Silence settled heavy in the room. Nicholas shifted uncomfortably, suddenly small, without his bravado. I stood, gathering the folder. Meeting's over. Monica, wait, Adele pleaded. Don't shut us out. We're family. I paused at the door. Family believes even when there's nothing to show. Family asks about dreams instead of dismissing them. Family doesn't gamble with your name for their own gain. I opened the door. Security waited outside, silent, professional. Nicholas shot to his feet, face dark. Adele remained seated, her shoulders slumped. Here's your final test, I said softly. Decide whether you want to be part of my life because you love me, or because you want a piece of what I've built. If it's the latter, you've already failed. I walked out, the echo of my heels on the polished floor sharper than their silence. Back in my office, Maya raised an eyebrow. How did it go? Like any good test, I replied, setting the folder on my desk. It revealed the truth. The confrontation with Adele and Nicholas lingered in my mind, not as doubt, but as confirmation. Words alone would never dismantle what he had built. If I wanted this to end, I needed proof. Cold, undeniable, irrefutable proof. That night, the office was nearly empty, the city glittering below the glass tower, when I sat at my desk, surrounded by screens. Maya had left me a thermos of coffee and a stack of files, each neatly labeled. I opened the first and began connecting threads. Nicholas's so-called empire of crypto investments was nothing more than smoke dressed in gold. My legal team had already traced public blockchain records, wallet addresses linked back to his name, showing patterns of pump and dump schemes, artificial price hikes followed by quick cash outs. Every spike that made him look brilliant left a wake of smaller investors in ruins. The second stack was worse. Emails he had sent about me. Messages forwarded from investors who now, after the Fortune 500 article, wanted to be on my side. Nicholas's words leapt off the screen like poison. Don't waste your money on Monica. Amateur hour. She'll never deliver anything real. That was what he had whispered while I was working until dawn. He had turned my silence into a weapon, my focus into rumor. The third file was Adele's shadow. She hadn't meant to wound me, but she had repeated Nicholas's stories at dinners and fundraisers, reinforcing the idea that I was the lost lane, the sister still finding herself. Not malicious, just complicit. But complicity has a cost, and I felt the sting in every dismissal I had endured. By dawn, my office wall was covered in charts and transcripts. Blockchain trails branching like spider webs, bank records tied to wallets, screenshots of Nicholas's boasts on forums, recordings of him mocking me to potential backers. It wasn't anger that burned in my chest. It was clarity. If Nicholas wanted to gamble with lies, I would counter with facts, not in fury, but in precision. Marcus stepped into my office with his tie loosened and eyes heavy from lack of sleep. He stared at the wall, let out a low whistle, and shook his head. This is enough to bury him. Not yet, I answered. Evidence only has power when it's placed at the right moment. Right now, this isn't a weapon. It's leverage. I met with legal counsel later that morning. The room smelled of paper and steel, the air dense with the language of liability and compliance. They flipped through the dossier page by page, faces unreadable. Finally, the head of compliance looked up. If this goes public, he'll collapse. He'll be investigated, maybe prosecuted. Then don't go public, I said. Not yet. Not until everything is airtight. Authenticate every recording, notarize every document. I don't want rumor. I want truth sharpened into something that cuts clean. Meanwhile, my engineering team contributed in their own way. Nexus Grid, our adaptive AI, could map networks of influence just as easily as supply chains. They ran a model using Nicholas's contacts. On the screen, his name glowed in the center, lines stretching outward to people he had whispered to. Each node represented someone who repeated his words. It looked like a virus, feeding on reputation. But when they overlaid the Fortune 500 announcement, the lines dimmed, the network weakened. His infection was fading. This is how we spread lies, one engineer explained. But truth is dissolving them. Don't erase him, I said. Expose him. That evening, Adele called, her voice breaking. He's terrified, Monica. He knows you're gathering things. He thinks you'll destroy him. I didn't answer immediately. Please, she whispered. Don't. He's still my husband. He chose his path, I said quietly. He chose to sabotage me. He chose greed over loyalty. Don't ask me to shield him from what he created. Her silence told me she understood, even if she didn't want to. By the week's end, the dossier had grown into something formidable. 200 pages bound together, audio files with timestamps. Financial graphs annotated in red ink, a timeline running from his first swaggering crypto post to his last desperate attempt to drag my name through the mud. When Maya placed the finished binder on my desk, she did so gently, as if setting down a loaded weapon. It's all here, she said. Enough to end him. I traced the spine with my fingertips. Power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it waits, silent, patient, printed in black and white. For a long moment, I hesitated. Once unleashed, this couldn't be undone. Families fracture under less, but I remembered the hospital director's letter years ago, the one that said our model had saved lives. That was why I started Astramind, to build, to protect, to prove that vision mattered more than vanity. Exposing Nicholas wasn't about vengeance. It was about integrity, about showing that you can't gamble with lives, with trust, with family names, and expect immunity. I slipped the binder into my briefcase. Tomorrow would begin the next phase. As I turned off the lights and looked out over the city, I imagined Nicholas somewhere out there, convincing himself he could still talk his way out, still charm his way back. He had no idea that the game was already over. The truth was patient. The truth was relentless. And now, the truth was mine. The binder stayed on my desk for 2 days, its weight heavier than any stack of numbers I'd ever carried. Every time I passed it, I felt the temptation to fling it into the world and let Nicholas drown in the tide of his own lies. But revenge, like technology, requires timing. A system only works if every component is aligned. I wasn't looking for chaos. I was looking for precision. Marcus stopped by late one evening, dropping into the chair across from me. He pointed at the binder. "When do we pull the trigger?" "Not yet," I said, closing my laptop. "This isn't about spectacle. It's about control." "Nicholas thrives in noise. If I expose him recklessly, he'll twist it, claim persecution, spin another story. I don't want spin. I want silence after the fall." So I began to design the retaliation not as an attack, but as an architecture. The first pillar was legal. My lawyers were instructed to file preliminary compliance checks with regulators, subtle signals that would raise flags on Nicholas's accounts. Quiet notices, nothing dramatic, but enough to make the walls close in. He wouldn't even know it came from me until the hammer dropped. The second pillar was financial. Through a subsidiary, I bought up a portion of his outstanding debts. He had borrowed recklessly during the crypto boom, and lenders were eager to unload the toxic remnants. Piece by piece, I acquired the scraps of his empire. By the end of the week, I didn't just hold evidence against him. I held his leash. The third pillar was narrative. PR drafted an interview request that seemed routine, another feature about Astromind's rise. I edited the copy myself, stripping out every hint of anger, every suggestion of personal vendetta. The story wasn't about Nicholas. It was about me, about the philosophy that had built the company. Success doesn't need permission, and it doesn't need applause. The interview would run next month, strategically timed. By then, regulators would already be circling him. His downfall would seem like coincidence, not orchestration. I sat in my office, sketching the plan on the whiteboard as though it were another algorithm, each step connected to the next, clean and efficient. The beauty of it was that Nicholas would never see the blade until it was already cutting. He thought in short bursts, in quick wins, in flashy peaks and valleys. I thought in systems. Systems always outlast gamblers. Adele called again. This time her voice was flat, stripped of pretense. "He knows," she said. "Nicholas knows you're moving against him. He's panicking, selling whatever's left, talking about new coins, new backers." I listened quietly, then asked, "Why are you telling me this?" "Because," her voice cracked, "because I don't know who he is anymore. I don't know if I ever did, and I don't want to lose you too." For a moment, I almost softened, but softness was what had nearly destroyed me before. "Then don't stand in the way," I said gently. "I'm not taking him down. He did that himself. I'm just making sure no one else gets hurt in the collapse." When the call ended, I felt the faint ache of regret. Not for Nicholas, never for him, but for Adele, trapped between loyalty and truth. Family ties can choke as easily as they can comfort. The following week, I tested the plan. Regulators quietly requested documentation from one of Nicholas's shell companies. Debt collectors redirected payments to the subsidiary I controlled. He showed up at a dinner party pale and sweating, his watch gone, his smile forced. Rumors trickled back to me that he had shouted at Adele, accusing her of betraying him, of feeding me information. He was unraveling. The system was working. One night, Marcus leaned against my office doorway. "You know," he said, "this doesn't look like revenge. This looks like a case study." "It is," I replied. "A lesson in cause and effect. You undermine trust, you lose it. You gamble with lies, you pay the debt. I'm just the one making sure the ledger balances." The final piece was symbolic. I prepared a letter, sealed in an envelope, to be delivered only when the collapse was complete. Inside was a single sentence written in my hand. "The house always wins, not because I wanted him to feel my triumph, but because I wanted him to understand the truth, that systems, not schemes, endure." The night before the next board meeting, I stood by the window of my office, the city a constellation of lights below. In one building, Nicholas was probably pacing, convinced he could still outtalk the storm. He hadn't realized yet that storms don't negotiate. They arrive, inevitable and overwhelming. I poured myself a glass of water and lifted it toward the skyline, a quiet toast to the work still ahead. This wasn't about crushing him loudly. It was about building so steadily that his collapse would feel like gravity, natural and absolute. And when it happened, there would be no doubt, no noise, no drama, only silence. The silence of a system correcting itself. The silence of revenge executed so cleanly it looked like fate. The lobby of Astromind's headquarters had seen its share of reporters, investors, and politicians, but never had it buzzed like this. Cameras flashed as journalists swarmed the entrance, waiting for a glimpse of the woman fortune had called the silent storm behind the billion-dollar disruptor. I stepped off the elevator into the sea of light, Marcus at my side, Maya a few steps behind. My team moved with practiced calm, shielding me from the chaos. Then I saw him, Nicholas Crane. He was standing just beyond the velvet rope, trying to force his old bravado into place. His suit hung too loosely, sleeves wrinkled, fabric cheap despite the designer label stitched inside. Sweat glistened at his hairline, catching the light in a way no stylist could fix. His once arrogant smile quivered as cameras turned toward him, hungry for spectacle. "Monica," he called, pushing forward. "You can't ignore me forever." Security stepped in, but the press had already noticed. Microphones swung in his direction. "Mr. Crane, what's your connection to Astromind? Did you invest? Are the rumors about your crypto losses true?" His jaw clenched, his eyes darting toward me. "She's my sister-in-law," he said, forcing the words out with brittle confidence. "We're family. We should be building together, not tearing each other down." The cameras ate it up. A desperate man invoking blood ties against the gleam of a woman who had outgrown them. I walked past him without slowing, the click of my heels louder than his pleas. But then he lunged, not at me, but at the cameras. "She's not who you think she is!" His voice cracked under the weight of panic. "She abandoned her family, The flash of a journalist's phone cut him off. A screen was raised high, displaying a headline that had just gone live. SEC launches investigation into Nicholas Crane's crypto fund. Allegations of fraud, pump and dump schemes, investor losses in the millions. Gasps rippled through the lobby. Every microphone turned back to him. Nicholas froze, his face drained of color. The words died in his throat, leaving only the raw image of a man unraveling. He tried to speak, but what came out was a strangled stammer. His hands twitched, clawing at his collar as if the fabric itself were strangling him. Cameras clicked furiously. Flashbulbs painted his panic in merciless detail. The sheen of sweat. The twitch at the corner of his eye, the sagging line of his mouth. He looked less like the confident crypto-visionary he had once pretended to be, and more like a cornered gambler, every bluff exposed. One journalist shouted the question everyone wanted answered. "Mr. Crane, did you knowingly mislead investors?" He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His lips trembled. His eyes darted to me, pleading as if I might step in and save him. But I stood still, calm as glass, my expression unreadable. The silence broke him. Shoulders slumped, knees bending slightly under the weight of cameras. Nicholas looked small for the first time in his life, not the man who strutted into dinners bragging about fast fortunes, not the self-proclaimed genius of digital gold, just a man stripped of every illusion, exposed for what he truly was. Security moved forward, guiding him toward the exit as reporters shouted after him. His last attempt at defiance came in the form of a mutter, almost lost beneath the storm of noise. "This isn't over." But the truth was already out, and the truth doesn't negotiate. I turned to the cameras then, offering the faintest of smiles. Astramind has no affiliation with Mr. Crane or his ventures. Our focus remains on building technology that saves lives, not gambles with them. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a board meeting. The microphones stretched closer, but I walked past them, the echo of Nicholas's downfall still ringing in the marble lobby. For years, he had tried to define me with whispers. Today, the world had seen his face under the harshest light possible, and that was better than any speech I could have delivered. As the elevator doors closed, I caught one last glimpse of him through the narrowing gap. Head bowed, suit rumpled, lips pressed into a thin, broken line. Cameras still flashing, immortalizing his defeat. For the first time, I let myself exhale. This was the climax I had planned for. The moment when the man who tried to bury me with lies would find himself buried instead by the weight of truth and the unblinking eye of the public. The investigation moved faster than anyone expected. Within a week, Nicholas's accounts were frozen. Within 2, his name appeared on every major business site under the same headline, "From Crypto Visionary to Alleged Fraud." The fall was spectacular, not because it was sudden, but because it was complete. Banks began recalling loans. His SUV, once polished and parked proudly next to Adele's Tesla, was repossessed. The watch he had used to flash at dinners disappeared from his wrist, sold off in a frantic attempt to cover debts. But no amount of liquidating could stop the tide. He had borrowed too much, bragged too loudly, gambled too recklessly. Investors, once charmed by his fast talk, turned into a pack of wolves. Lawsuits piled high, each claiming damages. Old partners surfaced with stories of betrayal. His inbox, once filled with invitations, now overflowed with legal notices and demands for repayment. The social cost came next. The men he drank with, boasting about the next coin to Moon, stopped answering his calls. Group chats went silent. His LinkedIn profile, once bursting with self-congratulation, was reduced to a wasteland of unanswered messages. Even Adele's friends, who had tolerated him for her sake, whispered about her poor judgment in marrying him. Adele herself grew quieter each day. I saw it in her eyes the last time she visited me, The pride she once carried for Nicholas had crumbled into something heavy, something shameful. She didn't defend him anymore. She didn't need to. His disgrace spoke louder than anything she could say. But the harshest blow wasn't financial or social. It was personal. At family gatherings, no one wanted him there. My parents, who once indulged his every word because of his supposed brilliance, now refused to speak his name. "Your sister's husband," was all they could manage, and even that sounded like a stain. Nicholas tried at first to salvage himself. He went on live streams, attempting to paint himself as a victim of market forces. His voice shook. His eyes darted nervously as viewers flooded the comments with receipts, links to reports, screenshots of his boasts. The streams went viral for the wrong reason. The spectacle of a man drowning while insisting he could still swim. The physical change came quickly. The confident posture that had once filled rooms collapsed inward. His shoulders slumped, his cheeks hollowed. The sharp suits were replaced by rumpled shirts, the fabric hanging loose. His skin turned sallow. His hands trembled when he tried to gesture. He looked less like a man and more like a warning. By the third month, Nicholas Crane was unrecognizable. Bankruptcy filings became public record. Lawsuits drained what little was left. His name was blacklisted in financial circles. Recruiters didn't return his calls. No one wanted to touch him, not even those who had once sworn by his vision. He wasn't just unemployed. He was radioactive. And yet, the most devastating punishment wasn't the loss of money, friends, or influence. It was the silence. The world had stopped listening to him. The microphones that once crowded his face now turned away. He had become invisible in the worst way, not forgotten, but ignored. A man still walking, but already erased. I watched from a distance, not with glee, but with a cold satisfaction. This was never about revenge for me. It was about balance. He had tried to sabotage me with lies, to bury my name beneath his arrogance. Now the scales were even. The lies had consumed him instead. Adele filed for separation. She came to me once more, her eyes weary but resolute. "I can't save him," she whispered. "He won't even try to save himself." I placed a hand on hers. "You don't have to. Some people can only collapse. It's not your burden to carry." When she left, I stood at the window of my office, looking down at the city. Somewhere out there, Nicholas was wandering through the wreckage of his own making. He had lost wealth, reputation, allies, family. Even his reflection in the mirror no longer belonged to him. And that, I thought, was justice. Not the fiery spectacle of revenge, but the slow, crushing weight of consequences. Thursday evening, the Lane family gathered not in the old colonial house, but in Astra Mines headquarters. I led them through the halls, past humming servers and glass-walled labs, the air alive with the quiet pulse of innovation. My mother wore flats, as I had advised. My father walked slower than usual, his eyes wide, taking in every detail. Adele followed silently, a shadow of the sister who once pitied me, now carrying her own quiet battles. When we reached the top floor, I paused before the whiteboard covered in algorithms. "This," I said softly, "is what I've been building. Not just code, not just a company, a future." My father set down his briefcase, worn at the edges, and looked at me with something I had waited my whole life to see. Respect untainted by expectation. "We should have believed you," he whispered. I smiled faintly. Belief wasn't required. Persistence was. For the first time, the silence between us wasn't heavy. It was healing. That night, as the city stretched out beyond the glass, I hung a new frame on my office wall. Below the glowing headlines about Astromind's Fortune 500 debut, I placed a faded photograph of a girl at a science fair, standing proudly beside a crude neural network. The little girl who dreamed too big for her family's comfort had grown into the woman who built an empire. I leaned back, watching the lights flicker across the skyline. Nicholas had vanished into the background, swallowed by the weight of his own choices. But I wasn't thinking about him anymore. This story was never about destruction. It was about creation, and I was just getting started. If you want to see what comes next, don't forget to subscribe. The future is waiting.